You have Howie Roseman at 1, Brett Veach and Andy Reid at 2, Lynch and Shanahan at 3. Now, I get to 4, and I see Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. Okay, and not that they've done a poor job here by any means. I mean, they have a perennial contender, and you mentioned that it's like almost not fair that they land on a franchise quarterback and now they're expected to compete for the Super Bowl every year, no matter what. But you also mentioned later in your breakdown of the Bills and their roster decisions that they seem to be taking kind of a Band-Aid approach to putting together a roster that can compete with the Bengals, with the Chiefs, and get to that Super Bowl finally. My question is, can the Band-Aid thing actually work when you're facing such elite competition?
Well, I think it's just what I kind of said with the Band-Aid thing too, that it's just kind of an unfortunate byproduct of their success where they built this super impressive core, but now it's really expensive. It's a really kind of inflexible. Like it's not like you can like cut like Stephon Diggs or that you'd even want to or anything. Like, well, there's not a lot of like places to go right now for like money in the salary cap cookie jar kind of. So I feel like they're kind of limited, especially after the Von Miller. So they last year I talked about how they went for like a Band-Aids, and also bold flourishes. I said they went for finishing touches and bold flourishes. Like a finishing touch was kind of O.J. Howard. That didn't work at all. The bold flourish was Von Miller, which was working reasonably well until he tore his ACL. But then the injury happened. It just didn't pan out. And kind of because this really expensive core, which is understandable. They're trying to maximize their championship window with Josh Allen, but now he's no longer on his rookie contract. So it's just kind of limited their flexibility. And what I was trying to say is that it's you can criticize them for taking the Band-Aid approach, but it's just kind of like a product of their own, the victim of their own success right now in that regard, where there's only so many ways they can really improve this roster with the lack of salary cap flexibility. And now since they're winning 13 games every year, they're getting bad draft picks. So it's kind of like only so much they can do. And so like, this is something that always happened to Bill Belichick, by the way. They're always picking like 27th. So you kind of like get tempted, like, well, you know what? We got to shoot for the moon with this first round pick. We're not going to get a guaranteed hit. So we got to do something crazy. We got to take, say, a catch first tight end who is Mike Gesicki 2.0 and Dalton Kincaid. Yeah. So, but yeah, they're kind of victims of their own success right now, I would say, the Bills front office.
Yeah, I've actually seen some Bills fans sort of refreshingly this offseason criticize the team's approach to team building and say, like, you know, what we're doing is not going to compete. We're not going to be able to knock off the Chiefs. And that's what this comes down to. I mean, there is kind of a nightmare scenario in which Josh Allen goes his entire prime of his career, and a prime for a mobile quarterback who throws his body into defenders with reckless abandon might not be that long, honestly.
No.
And they've talked about it. They've talked about that openly this offseason. Maybe Josh needs to tone it down a little bit. What I'm saying is there's a scenario in which he goes his whole prime without getting over the top of Mahomes, of Burrow. And that's kind of tragic, right? I just don't see how the Bills, how the team they're building can get over, can beat the Chiefs, can beat the Bengals and get to the promised land. I just don't know if they can do it.
And they're kind of just in too deep right now too, which you could say is their fault. But I do think it's just still more about like they've had a lot of successful decisions that end up being very expensive decisions, and that just really limits their flexibility. But yeah, I mean, they have a Cam Newton window with Josh Allen. It's not like an Aaron Rodgers window or a Peyton Manning window where it's just open, you know, basically until the end of time. It is going to be a more limited window with Josh Allen. And yeah, I think they did, I feel like, kind of misdiagnose their roster last year where they thought it was like very structurally sound when the offensive line ended up being not very good and the pass catching depth was like close to non-existent. And now they're kind of between a rock and a hard place, but they've still given themselves a lot of elite talent, and there are worse plans than basically running it back with that elite talent and making minor moves around it.